not earthly treasures. And basically part of what he's saying is, don't seek your happiness in the things of this world. Do not be attached to the things of this world. Rather, seek your happiness in the things of heaven, doing the things that God requires of you and trying to promote the kingdom of God here on earth, which also entails practicing charity towards our neighbor and everyone around us. Now, notice how he says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And we might ask the question, okay, what is it that I treasure in this life? What is it that I might be attached to? Now, for those of us who attend daily Mass, we might say, well, it's clearly God. But for many other people, it's other things. In other words, what is it that occupies their mind a lot of the time? For some people, it's a desire for more wealth, or a desire to win the lottery, for example. They keep dreaming about that. They keep hoping for that. For some people, it might be attachment to sensual pleasure, pornography, or just inappropriate sexual behavior. That might be their attachment, their primary fixation, the thing they always go back to, the thing that they think about often, the thing that they are easily tempted by. And the reality is that if we are able to be tempted by the things of this world, it's an indication that we have some attachment to them, some desire for those things. So the ideal is that we are totally detached from the things of this world. So I mentioned for some people it might be the desire for wealth. For some people, it might be sensual pleasure, but also we could say, just worldly things in general, like there's other things that we could include in there. And today is the feast of Saint Romuald, and I wanted to mention something about him. He lived in the late 900s and early 1000s in that period, and as a youth, he was very worldly, but on one occasion, he witnessed his father kill a close relative in a duel. And they were dueling over property. And when St. Romuald saw this, when he witnessed his father killing a relative over property, he realized that the pursuit of property, the clinging to property, is not a good thing. Something similar to St. Francis of Assisi. As you know, he embraced an extreme form of poverty, so much so that he fell in love with the idea of poverty, calling her Lady Poverty. But anyway, so something similar happened to St. Romuald. So he after that event, he went into a monastery. In other words, he just wanted to dedicate his life to God. He realized that pursuing worldly things and attachments of the world, it's going to corrupt you. It's going to make you so wicked and so evil and so selfish and self-centered that you might even kill a relative. Like, that's horrible, right? So he became a monk, and in many ways like a hermit, and then he went around preaching, and he also did a lot to reform the monasteries of his day. And, think about that. Monasteries needed to be reformed. In other words, these monasteries had grown lax. What does it mean for a monastery to grow lax? It means they became more and more worldly. So they wanted worldly comforts. And the reality is that most of us, we like worldly comforts. We like to be able to put our feet up and read a good book. I know I love doing that. But sometimes people want to do that all the time. I just want to rest. I don't want to have to work. I don't want to have to suffer. I just want to enjoy life. Sure, I want to go to heaven. I'll do the bare minimum, but don't ask me to do fasting or self-denial or to abstain from meat on Fridays. Don't ask me to do any of those things because I want to enjoy life. And if I'm not enjoying life, I'm going to complain about it. And that's a sign of our attachment to the things of this world. So we need to be detached. And so this laxity can also arise, as I pointed out, in monasteries. And throughout the centuries, this has happened. It's interesting when we look at the foundations of religious orders, such as the Franciscans by St. Francis of Assisi, for example, or the Augustinian. They usually start off very zealous, and they have like very strict regimen and fasting and all kinds of self-denial. And over time, it grows lax. And then there's usually someone who comes along and he he revives the religious order and tries to recapture some of those initial aspects of the religious order that when it was founded. And it's kind of like it's this cyclical pattern. And you see the same thing happens with us. Sometimes we're motivated. Oh, it's the beginning of Lent. Yeah, I'm going to try really hard to be better, to say my prayers, my spiritual reading, and practice self-denial. And then as we know, as Lent goes on, we grow lax. And then hopefully we renew it. So not just during Lent, but throughout our lives, we can go through this process of growing lax, and hopefully we recover our zeal. But sometimes the problem is people, they just keep going downhill. They give up on their religious practices. They stop praying altogether. They stop coming to church. And so the idea is that we try to motivate ourselves, and reading about the lives of the saints is very beneficial for doing that. It's a great motivator. I also wanted to draw your attention to today's first reading from the second book of Kings. So we hear this account of Athaliah. And Athaliah is the mother of Ahaziah. And Ahaziah was the king of the Jews. And when he dies, his mother takes the throne. She doesn't just take the throne, but she first ensures that there is no other successor to her son, legitimate successor, which there were quite a few. But she murders all of them, except for one. One escapes that she's unaware of. And so she takes the throne. And there's why is this related to us in today's first reading? It's kind of important because the descendants of King David were part of this family. And if she had killed all the male heirs to the throne, it means the line of King David would have come to an end. So part of what's being emphasized here is that it didn't come to an end because one of the sons was hidden away for roughly 7 years, six years and a little bit more. But anyways, notice, so another thing to note is that when it comes to the queen, even in the case of King Solomon, he had many wives. And so the tradition in Old Testament times was that the mother of the reigning king is the queen. She's the queen mother. So also with King Solomon, he had many wives. None of them were the queen. It was his mother Bathsheba who was the queen. And there's a passage in the scriptures where she comes in to see her son Solomon, and he bows down to her because she's the queen mother. Now, why is this significant? Because many Protestants, they object, how can you call Mary the queen of heaven? Well, because she is the mother of the king of heaven, therefore she is the queen of heaven. It just follows from the Jewish tradition. But what's very noteworthy here is, why is it that she wants to retain the throne for herself? She desires power, authority, but she also desires possessions. And how much is she clinging to these things? So much so that she's willing to kill her own relatives. Like, this is horrible. And it's not a man who's doing this, it's a woman. And the fact that it's a woman doing this makes it far worse, because women are more prone to love and to have compassion than men. So this is horrible. And of course, we hear later on in this account that, once the real king is put in place, that the altars to Baal are taken down. In other words, she was worshiping the false god. So yes, she was a wicked woman, but part of her wickedness may have arisen from the fact that she turned away from God and was worshiping these false gods. And that's what tends to happen when we grow negligent in the practice of our spiritual practices. We tend to drift from God. And there's a void that is created within us. And so very often people fill that void with false gods. Sometimes worldly things that we are attached to, yes, but sometimes it's actually pagan gods. And we see this happening even today. So yes, some people are given over to drugs and pornography and all these things, but there's also people dabbling in the occult, in witchcraft, in Satanism. In other words, they realize there's spiritual realities out there, and they think, oh, they're harmless. They just want to tap into them and gain power and authority, just like this wicked queen. that we heard of in today's first reading. So we need to be on guard. So when the church tells us, okay, there's certain days of fasting, certain days of abstinence, the idea is that we try to conform ourselves to that. And over the centuries in the history of the church, like initially in the early church, early Christians fasted 3 times a week. Now we fast only twice a year as a requirement. In other words, the church has bent over backwards to make it easier for us to practice our, religious devotions or spiritual life. But we need to be more strict with ourselves. And so we need to ask ourselves, okay, what is my treasure? What is it that my heart is attached to? What is it that I am attached to? Is it money? Is it comfort? Is it worldly comforts? Is it entertainment? Is it, getting likes on your Instagram or whatever, all these different apps out there? Like what is your treasure? And are we really laying up for ourselves heavenly treasures?